Thank you, Thomas. Good morning, everyone. So today when you came in or when you woke up, the air wasn't too bad, right? Because we had a storm. So my subtitle here is temperature inversion. So I just want to give you some background why we have a specific setting here, which worsens the air pollution in the valley during the winter time. This is the picture I found online. My name is Wiehong Wang. From my name, you know I'm from China. So this is the picture of Tiananmen Square, which is the most popular site pretty much in Beijing. The air pollution is not new to me. I'm very familiar with it. But we have a different setting here in Utah. So when you see this picture in Beijing, the the main causes for the air pollution there in the wintertime, mainly because the number of the motor vehicles, and also we have coal-burning plants around the Beijing area. And then we have some sandstorms from the north and other regions. So then was the main reason why Beijing has very severe air pollution issues. So I took this picture myself earlier this month. So we went to Alta to drop off my son to his ski team. And then we went back to Salt Lake to do some other stuff. So you can see there cloud over there, seems like cloud. I'm not that high. I was just driving down from the mountain area to the valley. So then it's the inversion we are looking at. I was really kind of shocked because above the layer is a bluebird weather. So people were happy skiing down there. It was about 9 o'clock in the morning. So when you drove down a few minutes, you will see you went into a totally different world. It's cloudy, it's just seems like two very different days. So I was very surprised. I know we have inversion problems, but this was the first one I saw from my car. I mean, I was driving down from the base of Alta to the valley. So I want to explain what's going on here. So this is the figure can help us understand what temperature inversion is and why it's important to understand it. And because it's related to air quality we experience in the valley, right? So there's some factors favor the inversion condition. So for example, if we have very calm weather, there's not much wind, and if we have very cold, clear sky and long, cold night, so those conditions will favor the temperature inversion. So you can take a look at this cartoon. On the x-axis is temperature and the y-axis is altitude. So in troposphere, the troposphere we live in, then it's just one of the layers of the atmosphere. So generally when you go higher, the temperature will decrease. But we have a strange scenario here. So at a certain point, we have an inversion layer, which means the temperature not decreasing, instead is increasing. So then it is so-called the inversion. So the reason for the inversion is because during the day, the radiation will heat up the ground and then the temperature rises. But once the sun is gone, the ground temperature will drop very quickly. But the air cools slower, right? So then is why you have a warm layer of air above the ground. So why this is important? Because this warm layer of air is going to trap everything in the valley, especially if you don't have a vertical mixing. That is why when we experience high pressure system for a few days, and then we are going to experience the inversion, severe poor air quality for a few days as well, right? And our setting, so our local geographic setting is perfect to form temperature inversion because we have tall mountains, we have valleys. So those two factors will enhance the temperature inversion, which lead to very poor air quality. So that is why sometimes when you drive on Highway I-15, you see the sign saying drive wise, carpool, or use public transportation, which means there's something we can do to help. So if you think about what is in there, in the murky air we experience here, we breathe, there are a lot of particulate matter, and also there are ground level ozone or sulfur dioxide and the nitrogen dioxide. So those are the things we can help if we drive a little less, and if we have better technology with the manufacturers and then the electricity production plants as well. So EPA is using air quality index to report the air quality we experience daily. So this index tells us how polluted our air is, right? And there's so the EPA calculates the air quality index for the 5 major pollutants the Clean Air Act regulates. So one of them is particulate matter 2.5. So Fern is going to talk more. She's expert on the particulate matter. But I just want to emphasize we do have this specific geographic setting here, and then we can do something to make the air better because it's important to breathe clean air, right? Thank you. Yeah, do you have one question? I think we can take one question. Yes.
Have we studied and do we have a sense of what climate change may do to these inversions in the future?
Very good question. We have Danny here. I think he can help me more on that.
One thing that adds to the inversion is snow on the ground because that keeps the near surface air cold. So with a warming climate, we'll have less snow on the ground, which might help the inversion. I don't know what the models say about general winds and mixing, whether those would increase or decrease. But less snow on the ground generally means fewer inversions.
Yeah,
I did know that.
but sometimes, climate change, I don't know, like 1 year maybe we have less snow. The other year we may have more, right? It's just,
In general,
yeah,
less
in
snow at the
general.
valley level for sure. Maybe more in the mountains.
And I think they predict greater changes in weather patterns, right? So when the storms come in, it definitely mixes the air and cleans up the inversion. So it may be less, I don't know.
Yeah,
But
so
they
between
also
less snow and more mixing,
But they
go
also
climate
predict,
change.
they also predict stalling the jet stream, getting caught up over the Gulf of Alaska, which may mean you have longer periods when you do have inversion.
Yeah, depending on the weather system, right? If we have a low pressure system or high pressure system down there. Yeah.
All right, let's thank our first speaker.
Okay, so
Let's close mine
okay,
here.
is that the X?
Oh, no, the red one here.
Okay. Oh,
Thanks. All right, yeah, thank you, Dr. Wang. Our next speaker from the chemistry department, where she's also the chair, and Fern Caka, she actually works on air pollution in particular, both indoor and ambient, I believe. And yes, she's gonna take us deeper into the scientific aspects.
okay, ready to go deeper. I have like 3 times more slides than my colleagues have, so sorry. I'll try to go through them quickly. This is something that I've worked on from undergraduate through the current time. I'm not as active as research as these two are right now, but I still do some. This is a picture of an inversion. I want to start out first. We hear about how bad the air quality is, and we don't want bad air. No one wants bad air. Every breath we take is a breath we need to take. It used to be much worse in Utah County when Geneva Steel and maybe a few people that lived here back then know how bad it was when we had a lot of coal and wood burning stoves in homes and also Geneva Steel. It was horrible. So we think it's bad now. If you rewind 20, 30, 40, 50 years, it was much worse. So there is positive news. And I'll show you the last few slides that there is even more positive news as cars have gotten better and those kinds of things. So it's not all bad news. There is some bad news. I'll also share that too. Anyway, this is a picture of inversion, and Dr. Wang did a great job talking about why this valley in the Wasatch Front, all the way along the Wasatch Front from Logan clear down through Utah County is horrible. Out in Uinta County is horrible, and that's an ozone problem out there for some interesting chemistry. But we're not alone in Utah County. Salt Lake and Logan is really bad. There's 3 non-attainment areas that are chronic non-attainment areas for the EPA regulations, and they're Logan, Salt Lake, and Utah County. So Dr. Wang talked about the criteria pollutants. So I'm going to focus on particulate matter today for this talk. I'm not going to spend a lot of time, well, a little bit. But first of all, what is PM 2.5? Essentially, it's really fine particulate. You can see on this graphic that here's a human hair, and PM 2.5, 4 little particles would take up to equal the diameter of one human hair. This is stuff that is particularly dangerous because it gets deep into the lung tissue. And there's been some debate about why that's bad for you. And it's still, the science isn't exactly out because, exactly in on why it's bad, although there are strides being made. Most of these studies were epidemiological studies that took statistics coupled with data from air pollution concentrations, and they saw a distinct correlation between like hospital admissions and deaths when the air pollution levels, PM 2.5, went up. So a lot of it were statistical ties, and then the science of why that happened is really kind of new. And one of the big things that they've come in the last few years is just the inflammation that it causes. Inflammation is a horrible thing in the human body, and these fine particulates in the lung tissue can affect you systemically because of the chronic inflammation that you have. So anyway, this is some things that it affects. People, especially people that are susceptible, are older people and young people, but everyone can be affected by bad air quality. The hospital admittances for pneumonia or bronchitis and that kind of thing increase even in normally healthy populations. So anyway, and there's always studies that come out every year, like links to autism and premature birth or lower birth weight in babies, those kinds of things. They're trying to find statistical evidence that concentrations of PM 2.5 actually affect all these things that we hear about in the news. So, those are individual studies, and I don't have the greatest research on all of these things, but we know for sure there's a link between PM 2.5 and heart disease and lung conditions and things like that. So this is just we talked about that earlier. So what is the cause? Well, there's different types of pollution sources that cause PM 2.5. And these are the 3 main categories. Point sources that I've listed, area sources, a lot of homes that might have wood-burning stoves. There's a lot of individual point sources, and they call those area sources. And then the mobile sources that we all contribute if we drive or take public transportation. Oops, I need to do that. This was hot off the internet last night. I was like, I had to see what the Utah Division of Air Quality is saying from last year. So this is from their annual report, the PM 2.5 concentrations. And they're reporting last year that the area sources, all of the small things that people do, is the biggest contributor to PM 2.5. Mobile sources here's the mobile sources, which I'm actually a little bit surprised at the percentage distribution in this. I thought mobile sources would be bigger, and I'm going to have to dig into why that is. Point sources, the manufacturing, refineries, those kinds of things is still a major contributor, but not nearly as much as the area sources. These numbers are like total tons. Anyway, so that was an interesting thing for me. Here's the EPA standard for PM 2.5, a 24-hour average of 35 micrograms per cubic meter. Now, you may not know, a microgram is a unit of mass, so, and a microgram is 10 to the minus 6, so 1/1,000,000th of a gram per cubic meter. You know, a cubic meter is a 3 by 3 by 3. 35 micrograms in that. So you're like, oh, that's not very much, but that's the level that's been shown to, we want to stay below. When you hear about red burn days and those kinds of things, green burn days, they're based on these concentrations where that 35 is right in the smack dab of the 0 to 50. So that's why the 35 is important, because there really has been shown to have no effect if it stays below that. Whereas, you get into the higher ones, this would be in some really bad inversions, when the PM 2.5 gets really high, you're into mandatory action days where you will get fined like $300 if you crank up your wood burning stove. That would be when the concentrations are really bad for all of the people in even the healthy people. You get into this range, and you can't crank up your wood burning stove or your coal burning stove. Other red burning days might be voluntary action days. So this was interesting, and since this is more of a ethics and not really a science symposium, I thought this was interesting what the DAQ is showing that they did last year for PM 2.5 and other air pollution qualities or problems. And I'm going to show the graphic of this one, the downward trend in the last few years for the non-attainment areas and all areas in Utah, reporting areas. There's monitoring stations all over the Wasatch Front that this data feeds into, and so every year they have to create an annual report. So I'll show you what the annual report is for the PM 2.5. Yeah.
What's a non-attainment area?
A non-attainment area is someone that exceeds the 30, well, okay, that's a good question. There's two ways you measure pollutants. You can do it on a daily thing, a daily time frame, a 24-hour average, or you can actually do a yearly average. And there's two different standards for that. The daily average is a 35 microgram, that standard that I said. The yearly average is 12 micrograms per cubic meter for the yearly average. So non-attainment, and I can't remember exactly how many exceedances of the 35 will put you into a non-attainment. You might be able to have 1 or 2, I don't know, or 0. I don't know the answer to that, Danny. Maybe you do. Do you know?
I don't know. No.
Yeah, I don't know what crank, but it's above that. Yeah, right. It's above those standards. And so once you have non-attainment, then you can have some sanctions. The EPA will come in and say you have to redo your state implementation plan to bring the concentrations down into attainment. And it's really bad to be a non-attainment from a federal government standpoint onto the states. So thank you for that. And I didn't know the answer. So bad on me. But anyway, this is something, I don't know why I didn't hear this, but Utah received $35 million from the Volkswagen Corporation from the scandal where they had the computer software that rigged the emissions, and Volkswagen had to give a whole bunch of money to the nation. And Utah got $35 million from that. So that was interesting. How many people knew that? You knew it. Oh, good. 2 people. Wow. Okay, the rest of us were not watching the news that day, but that's really good. That was excellent. And I like this. I'd heard about this, the grant for low-income people to convert their wood-burning stoves into non-wood-burning stove heat sources for low income. So there's a grant that people could apply for in Utah County and Salt Lake County where they could convert their heat source, their primary heat source, into something that wouldn't contribute to the air pollution. So that's good because those area sources are really important contributors to PM 2.5. And this is hot off the press too. The Utah legislature has an ongoing $500,000 fund for air pollution research. And that's good news. It's not very much money. You can spend $500,000 really quickly, but it's a yearly amount. So that's good news. So these are some hot off the press things happening in Utah, which I thought were really great. And these came right from the the 2018 Division of Air Quality Annual Report. So these are the graphics I wanted to show about the good news for PM 2.5. This is the 3-year average 98th percentile 24-hour concentration. What this 98th percentile means is that 98% of the data is lower than that. So this is what that data means. So a 3-year average, so each one of these data points is a 3-year average. And you can see this is the 24-hour concentration. Here is the 35 microgram per cubic meter standard. It used to be higher back in, I think, 2006. There was an update to the Clear Air Act, and the national standard from the EPA was lowered to 35 micrograms to get into that range where there's no effect if you're between 0 and 50 micrograms per cubic meter. So you can see this is the standard from 2006, and there is a downward trend in that daily average, a 3-year average. That's good news. And this is all of the Utah sites, all of the sampling stations from, Brigham City way up in the north, and here's Ogden, Spanish Fork, Linden, Harriman. So it's kind of jumbled, but if you look at that, you can see there overall is a downward trend. There was kind of a spike in 2013, 14 that it was higher, and it might have been just a really bad year for inversions that year, I think, those years. So anyway, here is the annual mean, and as I mentioned before, the concentration is lower for the average mean. For the annual average mean, it was changed to 12 micrograms per cubic meter as the annual average standard. You can't be over that. And so here was the old standard was like 15, and then in 2012 it was lowered to 12. And you can see a downward trend with an exception in 2013. There was that spike that went over. Again, probably the geography. Yeah. Well, that's a great question. She asked what are the behaviors that are attributed to the downward trend. Car technology is becoming way better, and what makes PM 2.10, I didn't really get into the chemistry of it, but maybe I should spend a minute doing that. There's 2 sources of PM 2.5. There's primary sources that the small particles are immediately emitted into the air, and then there's secondary sources where it's very complicated chemical reactions that create the small particles. And so the recipe for making PM 2.5, you have organic matter from combustion of wood and stuff that can react with the NOx that's coming from vehicles. And also you have ammonia in the air. And so the 2 main types of PM 2.5 particles chemically are organic PM 2.5. They're kind of mixtures of all the organics in the atmosphere mixing with nitrates and form these really fine organic particles. And then you have the ammonium nitrate. Those are the 2 main kinds of particles that are formed chemically. So if you can decrease one of the reactants, then you decrease the products. So by decreasing amount of organics that go in the air from wood-burning stoves and from diesel exhaust or whatever other sources of organics might be present, and decreasing the NO2, or we call it NOx because it's kind of a mixture between NO and NO2 once it gets out of a tailpipe. So that's the chemistry of PM 2.5. Is mostly secondary particle formation is the biggest problem that we can control. Wildfires was another area source that can emit small particles, but in winter we don't have a lot of wildfires, so that's not a real source. So to answer your question, I get talking, I forget what the question is. Car technology, yeah, that's and then just having no burn days and changing homes from wood burning primary heat to giving them a grant to change it so you're not having the wood smoke go into the atmosphere. So all these kinds of things are helping. And people may be driving less, front runner, people, things, mass transportation where you can take out 1,000 cars a day from the road on front runner, that's going to help. You're decreasing the concentrations of things by doing that. Yeah, another question.
Yeah, so I sort of worry about the goodness of recommending
That is great. I don't know if all of you could hear what he said. It's a very good point. In Colorado, they encourage wood burning because you're not using fossil fuels. You're using trees, which are kind of a renewable source. You know, not great. They kind of are. They're carbon neutral. Yeah.
Yeah, that's coming off the top of the carbon cycle. So
Right.
Not digging deep.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's
Maybe we can address that during the question and answer.
okay. We'll talk about that in the question and answer. But that's a very good point. It is a balance. This is a tricky issue because people want to drive, they want to have heat, they want to have electricity. You want to live a first world lifestyle, and how do you do that? Anyway, so I wanted to show just the good news that there is a downward trend, and reiterating what I said in the beginning, it is much better now than it was 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. I remember growing up, we had a coal burning stove in my home, and one of the spring cleaning things is you take this putty stuff and you would clean the wallpaper from the soot that was on the walls. Did anybody know that you used to clean your wallpaper? Yeah, and that's what you're breathing all winter long. And that's bad. It's really bad for you to breathe that small stuff. In fact, this morning I woke up to two news articles as I was trying to decide when to get out of bed. My phone gave a push to a National Geographic article about the horrific concentrations in the capital of Mongolia. I'm not going to try to say the name of it. It starts with U and lots of other vowels and some B's and T's and R's and stuff. Ulaanbaatar, thank you. And they have the worst air quality in the world at this point. And it's all from the coal that they burn. That's their primary source of fuel. And the hospital admittances and deaths, it's just small kids or just in the hospital. It's just horrible because of the coal burning. That's their primary source of heat and cooking in Mongolia. And the other one was an article that Thomas sent, was just hot off the press on NPR about the current administration's, I hate to even think about this. Well, this is my next slide. The current administration is eviscerating. The article today was, we want to lighten the standards. We don't want the standards to be as stringent for things like PM 2.5. It costs money. It costs resources to make the air pollution standards be at a certain level. And if you make the standards less stringent, then it costs less money, and big corporations and other people can make more money because they don't have to spend their resources in meeting the standards. And that's what the current administration is doing. They're looking at ways to reduce the standards, and not just in air quality, in everything, in mining, in drilling, in everything. They're reducing the criteria to protect the environment so people can make more money. And bottom line, that's what they're doing. And the data's there. This is not a political statement. This is a fact. And so here's my summary, and then we can do Q&A. PM10 makes you sick and kills you. That's a fact. And it is getting better in Utah. It's still not perfect, but we don't have very many non-attainment days anymore, which is good news. The 2.5 is the dangerous stuff. And here's a little bit of the chemistry. The secondary organic material and ammonium nitrate particles. I talk a little bit about the chemistry of that. Those are the main sources of the PM 2.5. And here's what I want to end on. The current trend in the administration is to remove the protection out of the EPA. And how do we change that? Well, we vote for people who understand science, and that's the bottom line, is we need to have people that understand science, and then we can actually have people that do the right thing for the sake of our world and our nation and our communities. So anyway, that's where I'll end. So Kevin.
All right, our final speaker for today, Dr. Kevin Shurtleff, also from the chemistry department, and yeah, he also has researched a variety of environmental issues. I'm just going to mention one. He has kind of researched technology to remove and harvest actually algae, specifically from Utah Lake, to actually reduce like harmful algae blooms. But yeah, he has also researched a variety of other issues, as well as like developed technologies as an entrepreneur. All right, I'll give the mic over to.
Thank you. Can you help me out here for a second? Is this a USB?
I think so. I'm not a Mac.
I'm not a Mac person.
Any
Who's our
Mac
Mac person in
people
the audience?
here?
Oh, there we go. I got
there
the feeling.
it is.
So I made a really short presentation, and then I have another one here that has a couple extra slides. And based upon what my colleagues have said, I thought I'd throw in those couple of slides to my presentation. So I need to find it here. Where's our Mac person? I just want to pull up my other one off of my thumb drive, my other presentation.
Here. So I think neither of us have used a Mac before. Is this no name? Is this the thing?
That would, yeah, no, that's
Okay,
it.
all
So
right.
that's it, if I can find it.
No name.
Okay, I apologize for, oh, here, yeah, it's my long version, I think. All right, there we go. Slideshow, oops. Max. Slideshow from the beginning, where is that? Play from start, oh. So this is a little bit longer version here. So as we said, the topic of, or my title of my talk, so my talk, as a scientist, I'm also an engineer, and I'm also an inventor and an entrepreneur. So when I see a problem that is impacting our society, my first thought is, well, can I invent something to solve that problem? So in many ways, I'm a technologist, and I use science principles, the same principles I teach my students. I use those principles to find solutions to the problem. And so the title of my talk is Clean the Air, End Inversions, Make Green Space, and Produce Renewable Electricity with Solar Updraft Towers. So my talk is more focused on the solutions to these problems that have been described by my colleagues. So this is my basic premise for how I do things. I ask myself, well, who's responsible to clean the air? So as an entrepreneur, that's always the question, who's going to pay, right? Who's going to pay to clean the air? Well, this is my opinion solely. I think we're all responsible for producing the problem. Well, nature, our geography also adds to the problem, but in terms of the actual production of PM 2.5 and these other, I would say, dangerous particulates, I don't want to be overly dramatic, but we all contribute to that, to the pollution that is filling our valleys, and in particular, during inversions, reach concentrations that become more dangerous. So in my opinion, the ethical question, this is an ethical, a seminar on ethics, the ethical answer to me is we're all responsible, which means we all need to take responsibility for what is going on and hopefully contribute to the solution, and that means maybe even paying for it through taxes, fees, or whatever. So this is the slide I wanted to throw in here. These are things that you and I can all do, and it's actually the cheapest way to solve the problem. It's called conservation. So we do things like idle free. When I pull into McDonald's to order my Big Mac, probably not a good thing, but when I pull into McDonald's, I now turn my truck off. I turn it off every time. And then I turn it on and I pull forward and I turn it off. And I turn it on, pull forward. Because that ends up producing a lot less pollution in the long run. So around campus, we have signs. I'm on the sustainability committee. We have signs, for example, right out here saying in the pickup zone, don't idle. Turn your car off. And it actually produces much less pollution if you turn it off and then turn it back on when you need it. Public transportation. Thank goodness UVU now provides all students and faculty and staff with a card that they can ride UTA for free, essentially, right? So take it. And in fact, we've seen the parking issues on UVU campus have gone down since they offered free free transportation, public transportation. So there's not as big a parking problem. That means students and faculty and staff are using these available resources. That takes cars off the road and that reduces pollution. Decrease the heat temperature setting in the winter. We set ours to 68 at my house, and I just put on extra sweaters because I think that's a little cold, but this definitely will reduce the amount of pollution we produce. And in the summer, AC is a huge consumer, well, it's a consumer of electricity, and electricity in Utah, around, I think it's down to 70% is produced by coal, one of the worst offenders, not only for global climate change, but also for these particulates and these other pollutants, which are a problem. So natural gas is better, but still, natural gas is a fossil fuel and contributes to global climate change. So if you increase your temperature setting to 78 to 80, we can all live at that. In fact, I like being at 80 degrees C. That's my perfect temperature. Now you get to 100 degrees C, that's a little different. But I think we can all, these are steps we can all take. Replace all your incandescent lights. Incandescent lights are incredibly inefficient in terms of producing light. So replace all those with compact fluorescents or preferably LEDs. LEDs are super efficient compared to your incandescents. And electricity, I think that for electricity use, about 25%, 25% of the electricity all goes to just making lights. So that can make a significant reduction. LEDs are probably 60% efficient versus incandescents, which are maybe 10% efficient, which means 10% of the electricity going into them becomes light. The other 90% becomes heat, right? It's not useful. Recycle, we're trying to implement a better recycling program here on campus. Because why recycle? Well, it takes a lot less energy to make an aluminum can from a previous aluminum can than it does to mine the ore, process the ore, and make new aluminum cans. So same with plastic, everything else, it takes a lot less energy. And of course, energy production is the major source of pollutants. Okay, I threw that in there. Oh, this is what my grandma used to say, and I love it. My mom said it, and I say it. Fix it up, wear it out, make it do or do without. That's my conservation speech. Okay, from there I'm just gonna escape here. Hold it, yeah. I'm gonna go to my other one because it has updated slides on it. Oops. Clean air short, there we go. Now we'll get into my short version. Slideshow from the start. All right, here we go. So, this is our proposed technology solution. So when I see a problem like high concentrations of particulates, I say, can we use, since technology is the source of our problems, really burning fossil fuels, internal combustion engines, natural gas power plants, coal-fired power plants, these have allowed us to develop the technologies that we all take for granted and that we couldn't really live without. And I personally love my technologies. So as an entrepreneur, an inventor, I look at a problem and I say, well, I love the technologies we currently have, but it's creating problems, so let's use technology to fix those problems. Now, there's a risk in that maybe the new technology will cause even more problems. So we try and think about that as a technologist and as an inventor. I try to think about, well, let's not create more problems with our new technology than the old ones. And this is our proposed solution. This is called a solar updraft tower. So the interesting thing is, when I first started this project, saying, how can we clean the air? It was for the UVU Social Innovation Challenge. It's put on by the Entrepreneurship Center here on UVU's campus. And I said, I had a student that was really interested. And he said, well, let's propose a solution, right, to clean the air. And so we looked at different things. And my first one was a brute force. Let's just put giant suction fans along the freeways. We'll suck the air in, we'll filter it, and we'll put out clean air. Well, I did a calculation. So on a 4.2-mile stretch of I-15 here in through Orem, if we put these suction fans on there, I think it was something like 600 million, no. Oh, it's probably down here in my other notes. Let me see here. I'll go back. We could filter a lot of air. But the electricity costs were around $900,000 a year. And that electricity comes from, in Utah, coal and natural gas. So it was just untenable, right? We couldn't do it that way, the brute force way. So we said, well, how can we move air? And that's what brought us upon this solar updraft tower, which I'd seen a long time ago. So what a solar updraft tower is, you can see there's a big greenhouse down there. That's basically just polycarbonate plastic. It's a greenhouse. It basically absorbs energy from the sun, thermal energy from the sun, and creates airflow because hot air rises, and it rises up through the tower. And it turns out that this one was designed in Manzanero, Spain. It's 11.5 acres, 800-foot diameter. That's what we call the greenhouse or the collector. And so it's been shown, and it worked really well. And they built it to make renewable electricity from solar thermal energy, so the thermal energy from the sun, heat energy from the sun. So this is how the concept works. You can see you have your greenhouse collector. The sun goes through the collector and heats the ground and the air underneath the greenhouse roof. And that air, hot air, as you may know, and this is one of the issues with inversions, hot air being less dense rises. It essentially floats up on the colder air. So this creates airflow simply by absorbing the sun's solar thermal radiation. And so that airflow creates a significant amount of airflow, and they can actually make electricity from it. You put turbines around the base of the tower. It creates wind as it goes up the tower. It turns the turbines, produces electricity, renewable electricity. Our addition, my student and I came up with, was the idea, well, let's filter that air, right? It's providing airflow. Nature, right? Hot air rises. Nature, this is what causes inversion, right? If you have the cold air down here, cold air falls, it's not going to rise, so it gets stuck because you have hot air above it. So it's the same concept here. Hot air will rise up through the tower, creating wind, and you can generate electricity that way. So we said, well, let's include filters to remove. So instead of pumping electricity into fans to create airflow, like on the freeway, my first idea, what we'll do is we'll use nature's principles to create airflow, and then we just filter that air as it flows out the tower. So we put filters inside the tower. So is this even possible? Well, yeah, another interesting guy, I don't know how to pronounce this, he's Danish, Don Rosengard, he created these little towers. He's been taking this tower on tour in China, and he basically sets it up. He has to plug it in, right, because his has fans that are driven by electric motors. But he plugs it in, it sucks in air, it filters out the air using a concept called electrostatic precipitators. And they basically attract the particulates to wires inside there. Yeah?
Are these the same electrostatic precipitators that are at the top of smokestacks?
Exactly. In fact, once again, being a technologist, I was sitting here listening to Fern talk, if a lot of these particulates come from burning wood, fine. Let's make them all put electrostatic precipitator on the chimney, right, to take out the particulates. Then they can burn their wood, and it'll be clean. So that's the way I think. So yeah, exactly right. We can use it. So this is the same principle. He used it. I thought he was really clever the way he raised money for his project. You see these rings down here? See the little black soot in the center of it? That's particulates he collected. So he calls it the smog-free rings. And people buy those, and he uses the money to make his project go forward. So we could maybe do the same thing. Well, one additional thought here is that we thought let's say it's an inversion day. There's not a lot of sunlight that makes it to the ground because we have these, they're not clouds, what do you call them? Pollution, I don't know. Yeah, smog. Smog, yeah, it is smog. So not a lot of sun gets down there. So if the collector isn't working during an inversion, at these times we could apply power, and we could actually suck in the cold, dirty air, filter it, and force it out to the surface, which helps move cold air to the upper regions where it belongs, and we might be able to if we have enough of these, we might be able to end the inversions. There was one other key indicator here that we thought was kind of cool, is underneath these towers, this is the tower in Manzanares, Spain, that's what it looks like underneath. We could make these 10 feet tall, maybe taller, and we could create green space for year-round use, because it's like being in a greenhouse. I don't know if that's a great idea or not, maybe you don't like it or not, but it's possible to do that because this space underneath, and actually the nice thing about this is, you might think it's going to be really hot like a greenhouse, so it's going to be warmer, but there's always going to be a nice about 1.2 mile per hour wind blowing through there as you suck the air in as it goes up the towers. So you'll have a nice little breeze. And I figured we could do all sorts of things with it, right? You could put walking, jogging things under it. So this is my proposal here for Utah Valley using these technologies. Each of these costs about $400,000 to build one of these. It would be a 4-acre. So think about your local parks. I was looking on Google Earth, and a lot of the local parks are about 4 acres. So if we built a bunch of these 4-acre ones, we can filter there. The important thing there is each park filters 600 million cubic feet each day. What that is a 20-foot high thickness of air, to think about it, at a 0.6 mile radius around. So it's almost a mile diameter, or 1.2 mile diameter around the tower. It will filter that much air every day. That's a lot of air using nature's principles. So I suggest build these. We'd have our parks available to us in the winter. Who knows if it would work. Maybe we could do frisbee golf under there. I don't know. Who knows? Across from my house, there's a frisbee golf course. So this is the final idea: is we want to move forward on this. I want to use some of that $500,000 a year to build one of these units, a test unit, much smaller. You can see here this is only 0.1 acre instead of 4 acres. But I want to build one on campus here, maybe in one of the parking lots, because we could probably make it so you could still park underneath it. But I'd like to build one here. It's 70-foot diameter, about a 50-foot tall, 3-foot diameter tower. And we could do measurements on this to really validate how much air we can filter and how much air we can clean. And I think that's the end of my talk.
I think maybe we have time for one short question for Dr. Shurtleff, and then maybe one more question for the general panel.
Oh, are we out of time? Bummer. Okay. Yes. So the temperatures we've done on our calculations about 8 degrees Fahrenheit underneath the greenhouse. Yeah. Yeah. So it's comfortable, warm, maybe hot to some of you, but I think 8 degrees Fahrenheit is about what we would expect. Yeah. And I've done the calculations to show that in a 4-acre area, there is enough sunlight hitting the ground to run these 24/7. Oh, I didn't mention that, by the way, is that these run 24/7, not just during the day, because the ground absorbs some of the thermal energy and stays warm overnight. As long as there's a source of heat, it keeps the air flowing. It won't be quite as high at night, but you'll keep getting airflow and energy production during the nights as well. Okay. Oh, that was the one question. Can I get one more short one?
Well, general questions can also be directed to a specific speaker, so there's a loophole here.
I will sit down here. There's a loophole. Yeah. Oh, no, it's a greenhouse. Absolutely, you could grow food under there. No doubt about it. Since it was a short answer, can we go faster or do another one?
Yes, there's another question on there, yeah.
This is like, I don't know, any of you can answer, but when one of you, and pardon me, I won't remember all the terminology, but when one of you showed the pie chart and it showed how like majority, I believe it was Fern, was like, it wasn't driving stuff, it was other things. What was that besides wood burning stoves that would like make up that part of the pie chart?
That was that's the area sources, all the little individual point sources like homes and stationary small sources were area sources. So I like I said, this was hot off the internet last night. I'm like, oh, look at that. So I don't know exactly all of the area sources that they're counting in that. Does it? Does any?
Same thing, and I thought maybe furnaces in our homes.
Yeah. Well, you know, if you have a furnace that's in the winter, you don't have a lot of lawnmowers going on.
This is a year-round chart.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, so it also includes the summer, so that was right. Good point. Yeah, so that was area. That I was a little bit surprised by that because I thought the mobile sources would be the largest fraction, but again the year-round site because those 2-stroke motors are really horrible polluters, and diesel trucks are horrible polluters and things like that. So, yeah, did that answer your question? So, yeah, okay, good. Yeah, Sally.
Comment on what you just said. I heard on the radio that Salt Lake has a new program that you can exchange your lawnmower for an electric lawnmower for free, and you just have to prove that you're turning in a lawnmower that works, and you get a free electric.
That's a great comment, and they're also doing it here in Utah Valley. In fact, I think it's happening. It's been happening, but it's happening. It's coming in the near future on a weekend, and I think it's happening here on UVU campus. If you bring your old lawnmower, you have the opportunity to maybe exchange it for an electric one.
Okay, I have one follow-up on that. Now, where does that electricity come from? You know, electricity isn't free.
That's a good point.
So we're getting power from natural gas stations and coal-fired power plants. So essentially, you're just moving the pollution somewhere else. So you know, there's no free electricity as far as an impact on the environment. Exactly. So yeah, the coal-fired power plants have huge things that they have to do to minimize all of those criteria pollutants, the electrostatic precipitators, and they get the combustion temperatures just right to minimize the NOx and things like that. So you're right, it is a lot more efficient, and natural gas is a way cleaner source of energy than coal. But so anyway, I just wanted to leave that note that there's no free source. It's got to come from somewhere, and everything has some drawbacks.